13. The Tomb of Horizon, the Arcane Sanctuary. Norg Vizerin struggled through a thick gray webbing, forcing his way down a winding, confusing arrangement of corridors. Horizon. Ancient statues lined the wall, each the face of someone familiar to him. He recognized Addis Zone, his fool of an instructor. Corbia, the far too innocent acolyte he had later sacrificed for his goals. And Morandi, the council leader who had fallen prey to his well-crafted words of admiration. Jesselyn Cotterill, the friend who had been betrayed. Buried behind the webs, he found everyone he had ever known. Except one. Everyone except his brother, Horizon. "Where are you? Where are you?" Norik shouted. Suddenly, he stood in a darkened chamber, a vast crypt before him. Skeletons in the garb of Vizuri sorcerers stood at attention in a series of alcoves lining the right and left walls of the room. The symbol of the clan, a dragon bent over a crescent moon, had been carved in the center of the great sarcophagus directly before the armored intruder. "Horizon!" Norik cried. "Horizon!" The name echoed throughout the crypt, seeming to mock him. Angered, he marched up to the stone coffin and reached for the heavy lid. As he touched it, a moaning arose from the skeletons on each side of him. Norik almost shrank back, but fury and determination won out over all other emotions. Ignoring the warnings of the dead, the soldier wrenched the lid from the sarcophagus and let it drop to the floor, where it shattered in 1,000 pieces. Within the coffin, Norik beheld a shrouded form. Sensing victory, he reached up to tear the cloth from the face, to see the withered and failing countenance of his cursed brother. A hand covered with rotting flesh and burrowing maggots seized his own at the wrist. He struggled, but the monstrous fingers would not release him. Worse, to Norik's horror, the corpse began to sink deeper and deeper into the coffin, as if the bottom had suddenly given way to an endless abyss. Try as he might, Norik could not keep from being pulled into the sarcophagus, into the pit of darkness below. He screamed as the world of the dead closed in around him. "Awaken!" Norik shook. His gauntleted hands reached to fend off nightmares. He blinked, gradually realizing that he still sat in an old chair in Drognan's sanctum. The dream about his brother's crypt, no, Bardak's brother, had seemed so real, so horribly real. "You slept. You dreamed," their elderly Vizuri commented. "Yes." Unlike most dreams, however, the veteran recalled this one quite vividly. In fact, he doubted that he would ever be able to forget it. "I'm sorry about falling asleep." "No need to apologize. After all, I'm the one who, with the aid of some wine, made you sleep. And dream as well." Southern anger made Norik try to leap from the chair, only to have Drognan stop him in his tracks with but a warning hand. "You should sit back down." "What did I do? How long have I been out?" "I placed you under shortly after you sat down. As for how long you slept, nearly a day. The night has come and gone." The sorcerer came closer, the spell staff now used as a cane. Norik, however, did not read Drognan's use of it as any sign of weakness. "As for why I did it, let us just say that I have taken the first step toward both our goals, my friend." He smiled expectantly. "Now tell me, what did you see in the dream?" "Shouldn't you know?" "I made you dream. I did not decide what you dreamed of." "Are you saying I made up the nightmare myself?" The ancient mage stroked his silver beard. "Perhaps I had some influence on the choice of subjects, but the results were yours alone. Now, tell me what you dreamed." "What's the point of it?" All friendliness faded from Drognan's tone. "The point is your life. Aware that he had no true choice in the matter, Nork finally gave in and told the sorcerer what he wanted to know. In nearly perfect detail, the soldier described the scene, the events, and even the faces and names of the statues. Drognin nodded, quite interested in all of it. He asked questions, dredging up minor details that Norik had initially forgotten to mention. Nothing seemed too insignificant to the listening mage, and when it came time to relate to the horrifying event taking place in the crypt, the Viserai paid very close attention. Drognin seemed to take special delight in having Norik describe the skeletal mages and the opening of the sarcophagus, even when Norik began to shake in recollection of his descent into the abyss. The sorcerer pushed him to continue, to not leave out the most minute bit of information. So fascinating, Drugnan burst out when Norik had finished, completely obvious to the agony he had just forced the veteran to relieve. So vivid. It must be the truth. What must be? You actually saw the tomb. The true arcane sanctuary. I'm certain of it. If he expected Norik to share in his delight, the wrinkled mage had to have been disappointed. Not only did the soldier not believe that what he had seen could be real, but if such a place could exist, Norik wanted no part of it. After Bartek's lair, the notion of entering the crypt of his hated brother chilled the otherwise steadfast fighter. He had suffered nothing but misery and terror since this had all begun. Norik only desired to be free of the enchanted armor. He said as much to Drognan, who replied, "You will have that chance, Vizarin, if you are willing to face the nightmare one more time." Somehow Norik found himself not at all surprised that this would be the sorcerer's response. Both Bartek and Drognan shared the history of a culture focused much on the ambition regardless of the consequences. The Empire of Kyrgyzstan had been founded on the principle of summoning, and the Vajra, its backbone, developed into demon summoning as a method by which to garner power over all others. Only when those demons had turned upon them had they willingly give up on that course. And even these days, there existed stories of corrupt Vajra who had turned again to the forces of hell for their might. Even Fotson had, at times, hinted of a willingness to take steps beyond what his craft could have deemed safe. However, Norik liked to believe that his friend would have been less inclined than Drugnan to force another to suffer such horrific nightmares, not once, but twice, and all for simple gain. Yet what choice did the soldier have now? Only Drognan kept the cursed suit from running off with Norik, who knew what monstrous his destiny. He gazed around at the multitude of books and scrolls gathered over the years by the elderly Viserai. Nork suspected that they represented only a part of Drognan's storehouse of knowledge. The sorcerer had kept him to this one chamber, but surely hid some of his other secrets from the fighter. Truly, if anyone could free him, the Viserai could, but only if Norg proved willing to pay the price. Again, what other choice did he have? All right, do what you must. Do it soon. I want an end to this. Yet, even as he said it, Norg knew that there would never be an end to the horrible guilt he felt. Of course, Drognan turned from him, reaching for another massive tome. He pursed the pages for a few moments, nodded to himself, then shut the book. Yes, that should do it. Do what? Replacing the book, the page answered, "Despite the amenities between them, Bartek and Horizon are forever bound together, even in death. That the suit has brought you here to Luke Lane shows that bond remained strong even after all this time." He frowned. "And your bond with the armor is nearly as great. An unexpected plus, I might add, but one I find myself curious about. Perhaps after this is over, I shall make a study of it." "You haven't told me what you want me to do." reminded the veteran, not wanting Drugnan to become distracted again. He vaguely understood what the sorcerer had said about the bond between the brothers and how the suit had to link that, but the rest made no sense to him, and Nork did not wish to pursue it any farther. His own connection with the armor had begun with the entering of Bartuk's tomb and would end when Drognan helped him strip the metal from his body. After that, the Vajiri could do what he wanted with the suit, preferably melting it down to make farm tools or some other such harmless items. This time, I will cast a spell that should enable us to find the actual physical location of the tomb, which I have always believed might very well be under the city. Drognan's eyes lit up at the possibility. It will require you to go back into the dream, but this time you will do so in a waking state. How can I dream if I'm awake? The mage rolled his eyes. Preserve me from the annihilation. Norgvizarin, you shall dream while awake because of my spell. Rest assured that you need to know nothing more. With great reluctance, the weary fighter nodded. All right, then. Let's get it done. The preparations will take but a few moments. Coming closer, the elderly Vajira used the tip of his staff to draw a circle around the chair. At first, Norik saw nothing of interest in this, but the moment Drognan completed the circle, it suddenly flared to life, glowing as furious yellow and pulsating over and over again. Again, the fighter would have jumped out of the chair if not for the warning glance his host gave him. In an attempt to calm down, Nork reminded himself of the ultimate goal of all of this. Freedom. Surely he could face whatever Drognan might put him through for that. The sorcerer muttered something, then reached out with his left hand to touch Nork's forehead. The soldier felt a slight jolt, but nothing more. With his finger, Drognan began drawing symbols in the air, symbols that flashed in and out of existence each time he finished one. Nork caught only glances of each, although at least one reminded him of one of the wards he had seen in Bartuk's tomb. That made him more wary again, but the time for a retreat had already passed, and he knew that he had to face whatever resulted from the spellcasting. Shazari! Shazari Tomaya! Nork's entire body stiffened, almost as if the armor had once more taken control. However, the veteran soldier knew that it could not be that, for Drognan had long ago proven his mastery over the enchanted suit. No, it had just been another part of the spell. Tomie! The silver-haired mage cried, raising his spell staff high above his head. Despite his advanced years, he looked more terrible, more powerful than any man Norik had ever met, even on the battlefield. A white crackling aura surrounded the Vajiri, causing Drognan's beard and hair to flutter about almost as if with life of their own. Shazare Asarupi! Nora gasped as his body shook violently. A force pushed him hard against the chair. The mage's sanctum suddenly receded from him with such speed that it made the fighter dizzy. Nork felt as if he floated, although neither his arms nor his legs could move at all. An emerald haze formed before him, a haze with vaguely circular shape to it. Far, far away, Nork heard Drognan shout something else, but it seemed drawn out of the unintelligible, as if for the Vajira that had slowed it to a crawl, and even sound could move no swifter than a snail. The haze refined itself, forming a perfect circle now. The emerald mist within the circle then dissipated, and as it did, an image, a place, formed within the circle. The crypt. Something about its appearance immediately troubled Nork. Details seemed altered, incorrect in many ways. The Vajira's skeletons now wore elaborate armor instead of robes, and appeared not to be dead, but rather cleverly carved from stone. The massive cobwebs gave way instead of tattered tapestries depicting magical creatures such as dragons, rocks, and more. Even the symbol of the brothers' clan had transformed, now a vast bird clutching in its talons the sun. Norik tried to say something, but his voice did not work. Once more, though, he heard the painfully blurred words of Drognin. The mage sounded farther away than before. Suddenly, the image of the crypt receded. Faster and faster, it rushed away from Norik. Although he still sat in the chair, it felt to the fighter as if he ran backwards through the musty corridors leading to Horizon's tomb. Row upon row of statue darted in front of Norik, vanishing as quickly as the crypt had. Although most faces appeared as little more than blurs, some few he recognized, but not as those from the warlord's dark past. Instead, they were faces from Norik's own life. Satan Trist, Fotson, Norik's first commander, some of the women he had loved, even Captain Costco, a few he did not recognize at all, including a pale, attractive young woman with hair the color of night and eyes so arresting not only for their exotic curve, but for the simple fact that they gleamed silver. But even the statues finally receded from sight. Now he saw the earth and rock all tumbling about him as if he burrowed in reverse. Drognin called out something, but he might as well have been silent for all Norik understood him. At last the earth and rock gave way to a more powerful substance. Sand, he blatantly realized. A glimmer of light, perhaps the light of day, spread around the edges of the image. Norik! The veteran fighter shook his head, certain that the imagined someone calling his name. Norik Vizerin! It sounded like Drognin, but Drognin, as he had never heard the sorcerer. The Vizieri sounded almost anxious, possibly even fearful. Vizerin! Fight it! Something within Norik stirred, a fear for his very soul. His left hand rose of its own accord. No! He shouted, his own voice seeming distant, disconnected from him. His other hand rose, his entire body following suit. He had barely left the chair when a physical force suddenly attempted to halt his unwilling progress. Norik saw the distorted form of Drognin, staff in both hands, trying to drive the soldier back, away from the vision of the arcane sanctuary. He also saw his own gauntleted hands meet those of the Vizieri. Norik gripped the staff as if he sought to rip it free. The staff crackled with energy where the two men held it tight. Brilliant yellow bursts where Drognin touched the bloody crimson flash where Norik's fingers sought a hold. Norik could feel powerful sorceries flowing through his very being. Fight it, Vizeran! Called Drognin from somewhere. His mouth never seemed to move, but his expression matched the stress in the words in Norik's head. The armor is stronger than I believed. We have been tricked all along. No more need have been said. He understood exactly what the mage meant. The enchanted armor had obviously never been under the Vizieri's control. The suit had simply bided its time, waited for Drognin to discover that for which it had so very long sought. The location of Horizon's tomb. In some things, then, Drognin had been correct. He had said that Bartok and his hated brother remained linked forever. So now did Norik see why the armor had dragged him from one side of the world to the other. Something pulled it toward the final resting place of Horizon. Something so powerful that even death had been unable to stop the quest. The armor had a mind of sorts. Certainly, it had shown far more cleverness than either Norik or anyone else so far met. Likely, when the Hawkspire had approached Luke Lane, it even sensed Drognin's spell work. and somehow knew that it could make use of the Vajra in order to further its own sinister goals. Incredible, unbelievable, improbable, but more than likely, the absolute truth. Energy sizzled between Nork's gauntlets. Drognin let out a cry and fell back, not dead, but obviously stunned. The gloves released their hold on the spell staff. Then the right reached for the image before Norik. However, as it did, the vision began to shift, to pull away, as if some other force now sought to defeat the suit evil's purpose. The image faded, twisted. Undeterred, the armor placed the right gauntlet into the very center. A crimson aura appeared around the hand. Caesarea Geovox! As the undesired words fell from his lips, Nork's body lost all suddenness. He cried out, but nothing would stop the process. As if the creature of smoke, his form stretched, contorted, and finally poured into the dwindling vision. Not until both Norik and the magical circle had both vanished did his screaming stop. This day they had lost one man to sand maggots, and another to the heat of the desert itself. Yet Galena noticed that, if anything, Augustus Malevolent acted more and more cheerful, almost as if he already had not the Arctic armor, the power and the glory he dreamed would give him. That bothered the witch, bothered him more than she would have thought it could. Such a display was hardly like the general. If his disposition had lightened so much, he surely had good reason for it. Galena suspected that reason had something to do with Sazax. She had not seen much of the demon of late, and that never meant anything good. In fact, since the other night when Malevolent had evidently lost his common sense and taken a walk alone into the dark desert, the mantis had acted distant. Twice when the sorcerer had found excuses to separate herself from the party and talk with him about their plans, Zazax had remained suspiciously remote in his comments. It almost seemed as if everything for which they had worked together no longer mattered. Zazax wants the armor, she considered. But he can't make use of the enchantments himself. Yet, if he could not, surely a human dupe could. And Augustus presented a quite and distinct possibility there. Already the witch had suspected Zazax of trying to manipulate her lover. Now she felt certain that she had underestimated the mantis. Galena had to regain her influence over the general. If not, she risked losing more than her station. The sorcerer risked losing her head. Malevolent had called for a rest. They had made surprisingly good time and had overall suffered scant losses to their harsh surroundings. A pack of leapers, monstrous hopping terrors somewhat reptilian in appearance and with spikes along their spines, had harried them for a time, but never had the troops allowed the creatures to come near enough to make use of their long claws and savage teeth. Slaying one of them had left the fighters fighting over the carcass. Like most desert creatures, the easy meal, even if it happened to be one of their own, ever went out over battling with something that battled back. If anything, the sand and heat continued to be their greatest nemesis, which had been why the general had finally relented. Had the choice been solely his, he would have kept going, even if it meant riding his mount to death and then walking on from there. I can almost see it, he remarked as she strode up next to him. Malevolent had taken his horse and moved on a short distance ahead of the column. Now he sat in the saddle, surveying the emptiness ahead. I can almost taste it. She edged her own mount nearer, then extended one hand in order to touch his. General Malevolent, Bartuk's bloody helm still in place, he did not so much look at her. Not a good sign at all. And well deserved, she cooed, trying to garner his interest. Imagine how you'll look when you bear down on Luke Lane clad in the crimson helm of the warlord. They'll think you to be him come back to life. She regretted the words almost at once, recalling how his memories of those of the helmet had earlier melded together. He had not suffered another bout since that last sinister event, but Galena still wore the burning reminder of the time on her finger. Fortunately, Augustus appeared to have his own mind for the moment. He finally looked Galena's way, sounding pleased with what the sorcerer has said. Yes, that will be a wondrous sight. The last one they will ever behold. I can almost picture it now. The cries of fear, the looks of horror as they realize their doom and who it is who delivers it. Perhaps now she had the opportunity for which she had been looking. You know, my love, while if we're still have time, I can cast another search spell for you. With the helmet, it wouldn't be... No. As simple as that. His gaze leaving her, Malevolent added, No, that will not be necessary. He did not see the shiver that coursed through her with those few words. He had verified her deepest fears. The general had even been adamant about taking any opportunity they could to seek out with sorcery the rest of Bartuk's legendary garb. When the helmet had fallen into his hands in the act even she would have called provincial, he had spared no effort in letting her use the artifact to aid in hunting for the suit. Even when they had discovered that this Norik now walked the earth clad in Malevolent's prize, he had insisted she still use the helmet at regular intervals to keep track of the wanderer's route. Now he talked as if he hardly cared, as if he had become so certain of the inevitability of retrieving the armor that he no longer even needed to maintain a magical eye on it. This did not sound like Augustus she had known so inside and out, and Galena felt it did not entirely have to do with the influence of the helmet. Surely the enchanted artifact had already solidified its hold over him enough to survive a few moments' separation, and that brought her back to Zazax. As you wish, Galena finally replied. How soon before we move on again, my love? He glanced up in the direction of the sun. A quarter hour, no more. I will be ready to meet my destiny at the proper time. She did not ask him to elaborate. A quarter hour would suffice her work. I shall leave you to your thoughts then, my general. That he did not even nod in dismissal did not surprise her in the least. Yes, Zazax had definitely made his move. Likely had even contacted the commander directly. By doing so, the demon had taken the first step toward not only severing his pact with the witch, but seeing her dead. We'll see whose head's on the top of a pike, she muttered. With no shadows in which to hide, Zazax had to remain far, far from the column until the fall of night. That meant that Galena could cast her spell with little worry that the treacherous Mantis would know of it. The sorceress found an ideal location behind a dune just behind the column. She herself had no fear of sand, maggots, and the like. Protective measures cast by her before the journey's beginning still strong. It had been within the limits of her power to do the same for the rest of those in the column, but that would have left Galena without any ability to cast any other spells. She had seen no reason to be so magnanimous. A few less soldiers would not make a difference to her. Dismounting, she took her water flask, then knelt on the hot sand. From the flask, the witch poured several precious mouthfuls of the cool liquid onto the parched ground. The moment she felt satisfied with the amount, Galena shut the flask, then quickly went to work. Her slim, tapering fingers molded the damp sand into a vaguely human figure, the size of a doll. As she refined the form, Galena muttered the first portion of her spell, attuning her creation to what she desired. The sand figure took on a more male aspect, broad of shoulder with indentations along the torso, showing it to be wearing armor. Knowing that the moisture would not last long, Galena quickly took out a tiny vial. Still whispering, the sorceress poured a few drops of its contents onto the chest of the sand doll. The vial contained a liquid most precious to her, a small bit of blood that she had sacrificed from her body, then preserved for certain delicate spell work. A representation involving Bartok's armor needed blood to mark it and, more important, to link Elena to the figurines she had created. That in turn she hoped would enable her to reach out to this Norik, touch him as she had on the ship. As distant as he had earlier been when she and Zazax had summoned the Dreamer, such a spell cast then would have required far too much of her life fluids for her to survive the effort. The soldier sacrificed in the tent had served her in place the last time. Now, though, Galena felt certain that what she attempted here would succeed, and with minimal effect on her. She drew a circle around the effigy, then placed her hands, palm down and fingers splayed, on the left and right sides of her creation. Leaning low, she stared at where the face would have been, whispering the final segment of her spell, while intermittently muttering the soldier's name. Norik. Norik. The world around her receded. Galena's view shifted, flew along the desert as she had been transformed into an eagle who soared the skies with the swiftness of the wind. Faster and faster it raced until she could no longer even see what the landscape lay beneath her. Her spell had worked through her own memories of her brief encounter with the fool. She further strengthened the magic by concentrating on his face, his form. Norik, show me. Show me where you are. Her view suddenly shifted, turned completely black. The abrupt change so caught Galena by surprise that she nearly broke the spell. Only quick thinking enabled her to maintain the precious link. She would not have time to try again if she failed now. Even this long away from the column might make Augustus suspicious. Norik, show me. His face appeared before her, eyes closed, mouth slack. For a moment, the witch wondered if he had somehow perished, but then she realized that her incantation could not have worked in the first place if that had been the case. The sand effigy demanded a living target. If not dead, then what had happened? Galena probed deeper, entered the frame in which Norik existed. By doing so, she lost all but the thinnest thread of contact with the true world. But by doing so, she also stood to gain so much more. And at last, the sorceress saw where her quarry lay. The knowledge so stunned her that this time she could not help but lose her link to him. His face pulled away, receded with such shocking speed that it gave her vertigo. The darkness reappeared, and Galena found herself falling backward across the desert, a complete reversal of her journey. With a gasp, the exhausted witch fell back onto the burning sand. She ignored the discomfort, ignored everything. The only thing that mattered to her was what she had just learned. So, Galena whispered, I have you, my pretty puppet.